Today's episode of Northern Lights is presented by North Star Law Group, a trusted partner for small businesses in Minnesota's legal cannabis industry. Whether you've already applied for a license or just getting started, attorney Jen Riza and her team can help you build a compliant business, identify and navigate risks, put together an application, and keep you informed about the ever-changing Minnesota cannabis landscape. Are you ready to add North Star to your team? Visit northstarlaw.com/cannabis and let North Star Law Group guide you through confidently opening your doors. Again, that's northstarlaw.com/cannabis.
A homie of mine introduced me to Gucci Mane in NWA.
In 5th grade.
Yeah, a little early. And then I got into like MF Doom, who's always going to
Really?
be my favorite MC now. America's Most Blunted. You know?
Yeah. No, I'm familiar. I think it's really cool folks that have MF Doom as like their favorite. Like they've put the work in to understand the artist and also the culture around. It's similar to like it's very niche. There aren't a lot of MF Dooms, and when he passed, it sent shockwaves through the hip hop community.
100%. I remember. I think it released on either the night before New Year's Eve, or it was New Year's Eve, or it was New Year's, and they said he had died on Halloween.
Yes.
And so I remember for like years, I was like trying to figure out cause of death, right? And it turned out, I think it was a complication from like a pretty routine surgery.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, Yassine Bey, Mos Def, that was his favorite MC, right? Mm-hmm. I think he said that in an interview. And just like the wordplay, multiple syllable rhyme schemes, and just like weird syllables too. That's like what really drew me to MF Doom. And then from there, Earl Sweatshirt, because he's kind of like the inheritor of MF Doom's kind of style in my mind, at least.
So we could go into more Wolfgang and Odd Future, but also like, where were you acquiring hip hop, like through your small town of Pine City? So like, I kind of remember downloading off Kazaa and Napster, and then, as you got older into high school, I had access to MTV Jams, channel 142, which really was my favorite channel to watch. Just put on hip hop music videos and just like learn about new music. So like, how did you find new music in Pine City?
Oh gosh. So obviously the homies, like all my buddies, right, would be passing me music. Those are the days of like LimeWire and BearShare, which I've never used, obviously, but
right.
YouTube had just become popular. I think YouTube came out in 2005, 2006, 2007. So I would have been 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And so music was coming out on YouTube as well. And
first YouTube video is actually like Como Park. It originated in like these guys out of St. Paul. Like one of the first videos is like a bear at the Como Zoo.
That is wild.
And I want to say YouTube's like 03, 04.
Okay. So even earlier than I thought it was.
I think so.
But buddies would just pass me hip hop. I remember like Lemonade, Gucci Mane.
Yeah.
I heard that. Came up on NWA, Jay-Z, stuff like that.
What year did you finish high school?
2012.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, Lemonade, Gucci Mane for sure. And then all the remixes, like the Big Sean remix, and that beat goes so hard. I even went to high school with guys that tried to get into the music industry, and they rapped over that beat. And so I also have that reference point. And 2012, actually just before 2012, like 2010, 2011, I was hosting a college radio station, like a hip hop Friday afternoon show called Fresh Beats Old Heat, with a couple guys.
Okay.
And so like I remember playing that Big Sean version of Lemonade on the college radio show. But man, let's get into it.
Sure.
So I'm here with Sean Paul Kehren from North Star Law Group. Sean, welcome to the Northern Lights podcast.
Howdy.
Hey, dude, it's great to meet you. It's great to see you. I think we met at Canna Connect 4 in April.
Yep.
Right after the 4-canna launch of the beverage, which we got it right over there.
Ooh.
And Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you here today? And then let's dig into kind of your background as well.
Sure. So I'm an attorney with North Star Law Group. I work in criminal defense, civil litigation, a lot of construction companies. And then I was just recently brought onto the cannabis team as well. So I kind of have have my hand on multiple different pots, I suppose.
Awesome. Yeah, North Star Law Group, huge supporters of the Northern Lights podcast, the Minnesota Cannabis College. We thank you for your support. And we also love working with you guys. You guys do a great job in the community, and I just want to highlight that, and I appreciate everything you're doing right now.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Right on. So let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
You grew up in Pine City, Minnesota. Tell us a little bit about your family background, and from there, kind of what were the common perceptions of cannabis in your community?
Yeah, so Pine City, small town up north, about an hour 15 minutes north of the cities. I moved up there after kindergarten, and so my parents had split up. My mother was actually working in the prison system.
Okay.
It was a good union job. It provided pretty good benefits for us, and so she really, really worked hard. Growing up there, town of about 3,000 people, little over.
Sure.
So my father wasn't super into my life. He had kind of shared custody. He lived with my grandfather down south, just south of the cities.
Okay.
In Savage, Minnesota.
Sure.
So I'd kind of travel back and forth there. And I think the first time I was ever exposed to cannabis was really young from my father.
Okay.
And I didn't realize it was cannabis at the time.
Sure.
So I remember we were at a job site with him, I think. He was a bricklayer.
Okay.
And he pulled out this like little metal thing, which I later come to find out is a oney.
Yeah.
He hit that, and I was like, "What's that smell?" And he's like, "Oh, that's tobacco." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's what it
That's
smells
what
like."
tobacco smells like.
Yeah, that's and the funny thing is like him and my a lot of people in my family smoke cigarettes. So I was like, well, that doesn't smell like tobacco. You know? What I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I mean, stay right there. Like, I just became a dad,
Yeah.
and I'm now having to evaluate where I use cannabis, when I use cannabis, and what are the rules? What are the concerns around showing your child cannabis at a young age, right? When they're underage.
Of course.
So you're not the only one who was exposed to cannabis at a young age, but it's prevalent, right? And in my life as well as yours, and I can understand the concerns of keeping it away, but I don't necessarily agree that like the side effects or the feeling is counterproductive to parenting.
Of course.
Although like there are safety concerns around using cannabis, I wanted to pull that out for a second because I'm dabbling in my own head around.
Yeah. And congrats on becoming a father, by the way. That's huge.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're pumped.
Yeah.
My mother didn't really drink. She didn't use substances at all. My father used quite a bit of alcohol, other stuff. And I think it has become so normalized, especially in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, to just be around your parents when they're drinking, right?
Right.
But when you throw cannabis into the mix, I think that there's still a massive stigma about that.
Yes, and I love calling out, as you said, massive stigmas because they creep into our lives in ways unknowingly at times. Like even someone like myself in the industry, I still have stigmas. I've been researching, I've been learning about this plant, professionally for 5 years, and yet I still catch myself, hey, I'm stigmatizing cannabis right now in a certain situation, right? So Wisconsin, known for its alcohol culture. Minnesota, I'm sure, is not that far behind.
Yeah.
I was just in Iowa recently, and a lot of alcohol, not a lot of cannabis. So you're absolutely right. And last night I was with some brewery owners, and that's one thing I always bring up to brewery owners is I'm so amazed at how family friendly the brewery, the third space, that brewery space has become, and yet they're there to serve the community beer, less alcoholic than spirits, and that's why we're seeing hemp-derived beverages in breweries, for example, and that's a win for cannabis in my eyes.
100%.
Right?
I mean, like Minnesota is revolutionizing the edible and the beverage industry, right? I've heard so many people come from other states saying like, "There's so many selections. I didn't expect this when I came to Minnesota. I didn't even think you had dispensaries or anything like that."
The first time I went to Dabbler Depot, I walked into their Uptown location at the time and was greeted with like over 100 varieties of beverages. And that was summer of 2023.
Wow.
And so Dabbler Depot was very early to carrying a wide selection of beverages, and they still do, like here at the Seed and Sesh. But I think that's important. And I think moving ahead, like when did you become more experienced with cannabis? So, you were exposed to it at a young age, whether you knew it or not. And as time went along, it seems like you found cannabis, at least in your early years.
Yeah. So I think probably like a lot of us here, like we were probably earlier adopters of YouTube.
Yeah.
And so like, it's funny to kind of hear about like the YouTube wormhole and stuff now. It's like back then, I didn't remember that. I remember YouTube when it didn't even have ads. But I remember when I was about 15 years old, I was really thinking about religion and like my own thoughts on it. I'm an atheist now, and I became an atheist after watching a lot of YouTube videos online.
Sure.
I took a political spectrum test in civics in 9th grade.
Yeah.
Thought I was very conservative. Turns out I really wasn't.
Okay.
And started working on political campaigns with the DFL.
Cool.
So then with that and kind of being a teenager, I think I was probably about 15 years old when I used cannabis for the first time.
Sure.
And my massive stigma around it was the fact that I had seen alcoholism in my family, substance use, and so it was something that was kind of scary to me. And obviously like I don't encourage like underage use of substances, but that's when I tried it. Mm-hmm. So I remember my first experience was during a thunderstorm, which was like an ideal time for me, right? Moving forward, I think the stigma started to drain away after I started seeing a lot of YouTube videos about cannabis and cannabis activism.
Sure.
The other funny thing was, so we're all old enough to remember when Netflix like wasn't a streaming service.
Yeah.
And so Netflix had just become a streaming service, and there were a lot of documentaries about weed on Netflix.
Sure.
This might take you back. You remember Super High Me?
Yes.
Okay. So I remember watching Super High Me with Doug Benson, and that kind of radicalized me. There was one documentary, and I don't remember if it was called Reefer Madness or if it was just talking about Reefer Madness, but like seeing just the history, the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act, and how it was used to kind of enforce segregation or to target, people of color.
Yeah.
That was something that like really hit core for me because I was just getting involved in politics. And so that fusion of cannabis and social justice was a big thing for me.
You were able to understand the lie back then.
Yeah, 100%.
The 1937 Marijuana Tax Act and the 1942, the kind of the last time that they grew hemp for the war. I love that you were able to see through the lie while you were attempting to kind of establish your political beliefs and understand. For me it was the Zeitgeist movie. The Zeitgeist movie that came out. I had just finished college when I watched that.
Yeah.
And it felt like everything that I had known up until like being 21, I was just completely flabbergasted, right? And so I love that at 15, and here you are, much older as a lawyer now, but like you were able to see through the lie and allow your beliefs to be stronger than what you were just given as a textbook.
In our small town, I think that first of all, I think one thing that isn't said is that if you go to a small town, it's actually really, really easy to see income disparity. The difference between, folks whose parents had like a really good job and those who are low income, it's drastic in a small town because there's so few people. And so I think, with the families that had been established in our small town, there was a massive stigma around cannabis. Whereas there were a lot of folks in my small town that I remember where it's like, okay, cannabis actually formed like a source of income for them, right? And we're talking about like legacy,
right? As a crop per se, or as a plant, growing it for commerce.
Exactly. And so like seeing that, I was always wondering like, why can't this just be like their business, right? Like, wouldn't it be cool if they could do this legitimately and where they didn't have to be in the shadows or under the thumb of law enforcement and being scared, like, making choices about like, can I continue doing this while also, owning a house or taking care of my kids or et cetera. And so now that we're in this time of legalization, I'm pumped and it's just been a long time coming. I mean, I was in 10th grade, I suppose, in 2010. And
Okay.
so then Colorado's legalization happened in 2012.
Yes.
And that was like a massive, because I just graduated high school and was going into college.
Okay.
And what I've seen now in Pine City is that there is an acceptance of cannabis. There are folks that were excited about Minnesota's ability to, Minnesota citizens' ability to grow their own cannabis and kind of foster that craft market. And now it's kind of becoming like a hobby for people that I suppose I really wouldn't have expected to have engaged in that hobby, right?
Yeah. We took Canna Connect on the road this year. We went up to Brainerd, we went to Garrison, and we were really well received in those small towns. And,
Awesome.
I'm not surprised at all that, people are using cannabis and growing cannabis in every zip code, across Minnesota, whether
100%.
they're more open about it or not. You mentioned college in 2012. How did you decide to go to Gustavus?
Sure. So I remember in 11th grade, I went, it was either 11th grade or senior year, I went to this thing called the Nobel Conference.
Okay.
It's a science conference that Gustavus puts on every single year. And I believe the one I went to was on neuroscience in the brain. And so I thought I was going to college to become a neurosurgeon.
Really?
And so my majors, and you're going to love this, I was going to major in biology and business.
Okay.
And I thought that was a very smart move because, what my plan was like, okay, well, legalization might happen. Like I'm going to have the experience to be able to either produce my own crop
No
or
kidding.
whatever. And I was pretty young at the time too. Right.
Sure.
So as a freshman in college, I'm getting some of the biology. I decided not to do business.
Okay.
And actually halfway through college, I switched into a philosophy major.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't really my way of thinking, I'm not very good with like technical measurements in the lab. It's like, you have to measure within 35 micrograms of something. And I'm just like, that's good enough.
For real.
But I'm much better at getting stoned and writing. And so that's what philosophy was for me. And honestly, that really helped me out when I became a lawyer.
Yeah. How much writing takes place as a lawyer?
Quite a bit of writing and quite a bit of reading. It really depends on what type of a lawyer you are, right? Okay. So there's kind of this dividing line between litigators, people who actually go into the courtroom, and that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Versus transactional lawyers who might make mergers and acquisitions happen between businesses, things like that.
Okay.
Both involve writing, just different types of writing.
Sure.
So as a litigator, I'm writing motions. A motion is an ask to the court, for example, or memos that go along with that motion. I've written appellate briefs.
Yeah. Okay.
Jury instructions, the whole 9 yards. But yeah, back to.
I was looking at your background. You've been like working on becoming a lawyer since 2020.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so, did the pandemic influence that decision, or were you already on your way to deciding to go to law school?
So I guess I'll tell you my origin story from becoming a lawyer. So, it's funny. Growing up, I had a lot of exposure to the criminal justice system.
Sure.
I remember the first time I ever had like an interaction with the cops, they had arrested my dad. Okay. And they had come in, I think it was Christmas Eve. I couldn't tell you the year, but I was really young. And my young mind, and I remember, I haven't seen the police report, but I remember them like having guns. And I remember my father always talking about his distrust of the police. And so growing up, I had a massive distrust of the police. Right. Which was juxtaposed with my mother working in the prison system, which is a little strange. Yeah. And kind of the way that I tell it is like, I've seen a lot of men in my family have to deal with the criminal justice system. Okay. Whether they're going to jail, prison, just getting arrested, on probation. Sure. And so at some point, as I got older, I kind of thought like, there's a good possibility that I might end up going to jail or prison, become an inmate, right? Right.
What is that called? I mean, it's like, it's hereditary in a sense.
Yeah.
Right?
The breaking the cycle, so when I was 19 years old, I had been growing cannabis for just like way amateur, right?
Yeah. Outdoor?
Yes, at the time when I got caught, it was outdoor. Okay. I never had like the nice high pressure sodium lights or metal halide lights. I saw the Grower's Bible over there. When I was young, I think I was 18, I bought the Grower's Bible from Barnes and Noble.
Oh, cool.
And so I started learning about, kind of the biology behind it, which we were also learning in my biology classes at the time too. And so I was like, yeah, I can do this. I can pay for college, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I ended up starting a bunch of seedlings, and they were really, really young. Really dumb plan. We went out to an area of land that wasn't ours. I went out there and tried to cultivate the area, and I ended up getting caught bringing small seedlings out there. So I was
caught in the act.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I was pulled over, got arrested. They found small seedlings. They found a scale and about 8 grams of weed.
Was it hemp?
It was hemp, yeah. And so I went to jail that day.
Okay.
And at the time I didn't know what the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony was. I knew felonies were not good.
Sure.
And so I get put into the back of the car, and I asked him, is this going to be a felony, right? And he goes, oh yeah, this is going to be a felony. So I was brought to jail for the first time, put into a holding cell, and then put in into a jail cell. Was released. I can't remember how many days after. I think it was on the weekend when I got caught.
Yeah. That means they'll keep you a little longer.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I didn't realize that. So that experience was not fun for me. And that kind of radicalized me when it came to the criminal justice system.
Sure.
I was hearing it from both angles, right? Because my father had been to prison in jail.
Yeah.
My mother was working in the criminal justice system. And so I was getting multiple different points of view of how the criminal justice system worked.
Right.
And, as a lefty,
yeah.
I was looking at it through that lens, and I continued to reevaluate it. But what I saw was a system that really, really, really doesn't work. And whether you're conservative or you're a leftist or a liberal or a centrist, whatever, you can make arguments for why the prison system doesn't work.
Yes.
I think the conservative argument is that we are wasting a ton of money on a criminal justice system that doesn't make people better. And maybe, folks don't see the prison system as rehabilitative. They just see it as retributive or punishment.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that does society any good.
I agree.
I think that putting someone in a cage, for 5-10 years, with other people who are in cages and some folks who need like extra help when it comes to like mental health, things like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make them a better person. And then to expect them to act like a model citizen when they're coming out
right.
with a felony, they can't get a job or tough time getting a job, an apartment, anything like that.
And they've been removed from society to jump back onto the treadmill. Oftentimes you're going to fall.
Of course. And I think it's absurd that we put people in that position. And so I think from a conservative angle, we are wasting a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
From my angle, I think it is disgusting how we treat people like that, regardless of whatever you have done.
Sure.
The reason why we have a justice system, a system of laws, is to prevent that retribution or that retributive impulse of individuals, right?
Okay.
Like if I did, this is from, I think, Oliver Wendell Holmes' The Common Law, the small portion of that book that I read. He was a former Supreme Court justice, and he talks about how, without a system of laws, if I steal something from you and we didn't have a system of laws or a court to deal with it, your only recourse is to come back at me with retribution, right?
Right.
So I think when it comes to dealing with crimes or just breaking the social contract by doing certain things,
yes,
we need to have a system that treats people fairly, humanely, and should be rehabilitating people to make them model citizens, or at least make them a contributing member of society.
Right. You want to leave the place better than how you found it.
Exactly. I ended up going through the criminal justice system there. I ended up getting a probation violation, so I went back to jail, which was not fun.
I see.
And so I ended up getting bailed out. I had a good attorney at the time,
right,
who got me a deal known as a stay of adjudication.
Okay.
I know you talked about this with Jen on a previous podcast.
We did,
there.
yeah.
So
would not have qualified for social equity.
And I found that out after it's the West King case, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I found out about that later on, obviously. But I get a stay of adjudication. I'm a freshman in college. and I'm on probation for 3 years, and I graduate from college, and then they take me off probation. I felt like they were just waiting for me to graduate from college, and like once I did that, I was like, all right, you're good.
Wow. So you spent college on probation.
I did. It was not fun.
We're going to be right back, and we're going to dig a little bit more into your story.
Sure.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm Allie Mann, co-founder of Moonlight Cannabis, and this is our gummy, Space Cadet. This is far and away our best seller, most popular gummy.
This has live resin added to the THC. The live resin is flash frozen, and then they extract it once it's frozen. That helps maintain all the terpenes, cannabinoids. And so when you combine that with the THC, it gives a similar effect to smoking flower, I would say, in my opinion. It hits you a little bit quicker. It's got a quicker onset, and it's a little bit stronger. It's got a happy, floaty fun are the effects that it gives you. It's my personal favorite gummy.
I think Space Cadet is for everybody because this is the fun one. This is the one for girls' night. This is the one for a concert. This is the one for hanging out and just having a chitty chat with your friends, right? Like, this one is good vibes. It's higher energy. You're gonna just feel happy, floaty fun. So it's just for anyone looking to really like kind of have a good time. And you can find Space Cadet at all Dabbler Depot THC locations.
Being on probation while in college, having the background that you had in high school, how did you navigate staying the course as you were a Gusty? So
it was difficult, right? I was really focused on not getting kicked out of school. I was, dead set on becoming the first person in my core family there to graduate from college, and I really didn't want to disappoint people. With that probation, there came some like conditions. I had to go to outpatient treatment.
Oh, you did?
I remember going to an outpatient treatment in group, and at the time, I was not super receptive to that.
Yeah.
There were some things that I didn't agree with. I remember we watched the movie The Secret, if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it in the recovery community.
Yeah, so we watched it was about like manifesting your future, right? And I just did not buy that at all. And I was like, why are we watching this? This is like indoctrination.
Right.
I think that we should be focusing more on like, group activity, like what drives us to use substances, right?
Yeah.
And also at the time, I was in there for cannabis, and
right.
I just like felt like I was the odd person out who like didn't like, need to be there.
Yes.
Little did I know, like later on, I would quit drinking because that became an issue for me.
Sure.
And alcohol had been an issue, but it was, I got pulled out of group. I was put in and doing individual therapy.
Okay.
With shout out to Bob.
Yeah.
That was extremely valuable for me.
Great.
Because Bob had been through some things in his life. I was able to tell him on kind of like a peer-to-peer basis about just like why I was suffering from mental health issues, the stress of being on probation, and things like that.
Yeah.
And he was extremely receptive.
Yeah.
I finished with outpatient treatment. During this whole time, I was under the possibility of being randomly tested, right? And so that was always a fear for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was really just not wanting to do that. So it was honestly a constant stress.
Yeah.
I was always nervous about being around police officers. I was always nervous that I was going to mess up probation. And so like, honestly, I just kind of like white knuckled it through to like make sure I would not screw that up.
There aren't a lot of kids, I would imagine, especially at Gustavus, that were going through that same set of precautions and rules that you had to follow. Where was your outpatient clinic? Where would you have to travel to from St. Peter?
This was just down in Mankato, so
yeah.
it wasn't too
Sure.
far away.
But still, like you're having to go to Mankato. You're being removed from the college environment. You're not even fully believing that you're an addict or that cannabis requires this type of treatment. Granted, you may have still been using alcohol at the time.
Yeah.
It does sound like you found the silver lining in working with Bob, and that informed how you proceeded to become an adult at time, over time. I think that's important, and you made the most of it, it seems like.
100%. coming into Gustavus, it was funny. So I've always been involved. I've been involved with the DFL party since I was 15. When I was a freshman in college, I missed orientation because I was a national delegate for Obama to the 2012 National Convention in Charlotte.
Cool.
And then in 2016, actually, before my senior year, I was a national delegate for Bernie Sanders.
Oh, you were.
I became a meme at that convention that was like passed around, and so like that was interesting. And I think, like, you know, on a personal note, with the probation stuff,
yeah,
I kind of almost use that as street cred with people at Gustavus, because
sure,
it was much less working class like Pine City was, and there were a lot of kids that had come from families where there was access to money or they had both parents. And so I thought it was fun to, like, I'm doing well in school, but also I have like this like bad side, or, like, dark side, and I tried to use that as street cred. I'm not sure if that worked out positively for me in the end, because like word gets around pretty quickly.
Sure.
But look at where I am now. Okay,
I mean, I think you're pretty accomplished. You know, I have a lot of respect for you, Sean.
Oh, thanks,
and
man.
even learning more just in this short interview so far, it helps pull back the curtain, and that's why we do these interviews. We really want people in the community to be able to learn about each other and be able to resonate. I hope folks who are listening to this are, you know, reach out to you, you know, find you on LinkedIn, connect with you, tell Sean, hey, I found your story really interesting, and I'm interested in learning more about North Star Law Group.
Yeah, 100%. So I think I weaved a tangent. I'll come back to why I became a lawyer then.
Okay.
So my junior year in college, I started thinking about going to law school, right?
Sure.
So I'm like, what do I have to do? I have to take the LSAT. I have to write a personal statement, and I have to get good grades. Like, I did relatively well at Gustavus, but not as well as I wanted to.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to deal with like mental health, focusing on things like extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
I should have been focusing on school more. I
hear
wasn't
that.
in choir my entire duration in Gustavus and sang in the Gustavus choir.
You did.
But I ended up not taking the LSAT. I finished my senior year and was like, what am I going to do? Or I was about to finish.
Yep.
I get hit up by someone who was very integral for me in politics growing up. And they said, hey, Rick Nolan, who's a congressman up north, he just passed, rest in peace.
Oh, yeah.
Also one of my heroes. He always will be. A true blue populist Democrat.
Nice.
And in the vein of FDR, Robert La Follette, things like that.
Yep.
The farmer labor wing of the DFL, right?
Okay.
But I got hit up to become a field organizer.
Sure.
So I'm working as a field organizer in Cambridge, Minnesota.
Okay.
And that's kind of the part of the 8th Congressional District. It's like the Arrowhead out to Brainerd and then down to Wyoming, Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's a little more conservative.
Definitely out there.
But Rick was so authentic that he could speak to you even if you were a Tea Party Republican, right?
Sure.
And this is in 2016.
Which that was right around the time of the or your post high school experience. You saw the rise of the Tea Party movement.
Oh yeah. In 10th grade, the Tea Party started moving in, and then Obama wins in 2012, big convention. 2014 is kind of a resurgence of the Tea Party.
Yes.
And then we have 2016 with Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Nolan ended up winning that election by, I think, like 0.2 or 0.4%.
Wow.
And he outperformed Hillary, I think, by 16%. And he ended up winning.
Good.
So I'm working on more campaigns as I'm going along.
Mm-hmm.
Made a lot of really good friends. I've people that I consider my family in the DFL party.
Wow.
But I knew that I wanted to become a lawyer. And at the time when
but I like that track where you're not necessarily diminishing what's out there. You're putting your time into passion. You're putting your time into things that you believe in, knowing that your career is still coming.
100%. Yeah. And that's what I was hoping for, right? The biggest thing for me was studying for the LSAT. I just didn't have the willpower or the drive to do that. I had taken formal logic a semester, and then I had taken advanced logic. Luckily, I had friends that were really good at logic, so like they really tutored me in that. So I knew about like if-then statements, Boolean logic, things like that. But I really didn't want to take the LSAT.
Okay.
So I take the LSAT in, I think it was February of 2020. And I did not do great. I did pretty terribly. And it's because I just didn't study for it very well.
Sure.
So I get another try in May. And if you remember in March of 2020, that's when COVID hits.
I do.
So I'm like, what is going to go on here? They end up allowing us to take it from home, which was nice. I mean, the first time I took it, I had to drive up to Duluth to UMD.
Sure.
And so I took it from home. I ended up getting a pretty solid score, at least like I thought it was solid.
Nice.
Get into Mitchell Hamlin, and they give me a pretty sweet scholarship.
Okay.
So I start in the fall of 2020. And we are all online. Honestly,
Yes.
I was just thankful to be in law school.
Yeah.
Didn't care that we weren't in person, didn't care about anything, and like we made it work.
Did you live in Pine River?
No, so I was living
Pine City, excuse me.
Yeah, no worries. I was in the cities at this time.
Okay.
So I was taking classes from home. I ended up getting COVID in the fall. Luckily not during finals, but like it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Ouch.
And I was, I remember when it happened, like I came home, I was like, I got home, I was like, I feel like I'm going to die. And then I ended up having night terrors that night and like sweating, like it was like a bad acid trip almost.
Yeah.
And so COVID really did have an effect on law school. And there were a lot of folks in my class that like really, really didn't like being online and wanted to be in person.
Yeah.
Frankly, as we kept doing online classes into the spring semester, I did want to start meeting a lot of my friends, my classmates face to face.
Right.
And then the fall of my second year in law school is when we started coming back into class.
Okay.
Which was nice because like I was like, finally, I'm on campus. Like I feel like I'm in law school now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite a transition. I was in the part-time program at Mitchell Hamlin, which I would totally recommend if you want to work full-time or part-time, go to school part-time,
right.
You can 100% do it.
Yes.
And also as a word of encouragement to like folks who might not think that they can like become a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
You can 100% do that. We need more people in the legal field that have had backgrounds where maybe they've been to jail, maybe they know their parents were in prison. We need a lot more people with that perspective.
I love that.
So that was kind of my main drive, coming into it. I really, really tried to put my nose to the grindstone, but it's a different type of studying in law school.
Okay.
You have to be very diligent, and you have to weed out what you are going to study and what is going to have to fall by the wayside, especially as a part-time student, right?
Okay.
Because you're going to be going to work in the afternoon, and then you're going to have class in the evening, maybe starting at 6,
right?
Maybe starting at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And so finding the time to be able to study, to be able to do the readings, and
put the time in.
Oh yeah. And like know what you're reading to and how to study. That's something that like, you really have to develop in your first year of law school. And it took a little bit of time for me to be able to do that.
It's discernment.
Right? Of course.
So
of course.
You're staring out at all this knowledge that you could acquire, needing to realize what you need to require given your constraints in your daily life.
Definitely. And some classes are taught in the traditional case law way too. So they don't just like hand you the answer of like, this is what the rule against perpetuities is. They'll give you a case and then you have to derive the rule from that case itself.
Okay.
That was kind of frustrating for me because like, I'm the type of person that likes to read a summary of like a book beforehand. So then I know what to look for in the book afterwards.
Yes, I prefer that.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Right.
And I had to really, really get used to that, get used to like reading the Uniform Commercial Code, which again, I was like always interested in criminal law. I knew I wanted to be a criminal lawyer going into law school.
Sure.
I had people, telling me like, why did you think about like maybe other types of law, be open? And I was like, yeah, I 100% will. But there was a reason why I went to law school.
Yes.
And it was because the criminal justice system personally affected me
and
my family. And I saw that as an injustice, not only to our country, but to humanity in the way that we were actually treating individuals.
Okay.
And the fact that it's just not working.
Yes.
I trying to adapt to that type of learning was a little difficult and challenging, but I came around to it. your first year in law school, a lot of people say this is going to be your toughest.
Okay.
Because you're learning, you're trying to figure out how to study. You're being introduced to all of like the core topics of the law that I think the ABA requires you to learn. So we're talking criminal law, contracts, torts, which are like battery, assault, but on like a civil level, right?
Right.
Constitutional law, and figuring out, how do I put all these pieces together to understand what the law is?
Okay.
I promise you, if you are diligent and in law school, you will figure it out. It just sometimes people have to put in a little bit more work than others. And I remember my second semester in law school with one specific class, like sometimes I was getting sleep 4 hours a night, 3 hours a night, going
Really?
to work the next day.
Wow.
I did end up becoming better at studying after that, but
Sure.
the way that I structured my law school schedule was I wanted it there are like 7 or 8 classes that you have to take. I think the ABA requires you to take.
Sure.
But then I wanted to take all the bar classes I could for topics that were on the bar, because it was like, if I'm going to be tested on this, I should probably take a class.
Study it. Yeah.
And then the one thing I really, really wanted to focus on in law school was advocacy, because my goal was to become a trial lawyer.
Yes.
The Perry Masons on TV or the Law and Order, like that's the stuff that like people think about when they think about lawyers, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I thought about too. Clearly I like to talk, right? And so like if you like to talk, being a trial lawyer is like the best, because
Absolutely.
the jury has to listen to you, right?
Yeah.
Like they can't get up and walk away.
No.
The judge can tell you to shut up, and like the opposing counsel like can object to you, but like I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I took a ton of advocacy classes at Mitchell.
Okay.
And like I really liked Mitchell Hamlin's advocacy program. I learned quite a bit. I was on the mock trial team there.
Sure.
And that was a ton of fun and served me really, really well.
Yeah.
Coming out of law school and having that experience.
I tend to have this viewpoint where if you take time in between high school and college, or college and an advanced degree like a law degree, and you put your time into passion in the meantime, you end up coming into whatever's next more focused, more diligent, more decisive on why you're there in the first place. And you're not just moving from school to job to what do I do next? Or, hey, I wake up and I'm 35 years old. Like, have I done anything with my life? So
I wholeheartedly endorse that. Like if I would have tried to go to law school like right after college, I don't think it would have went very well for me, to be honest with you. I kind of had a little bit of growing up to do.
sure. Likewise.
I'm still growing up a little bit, to be honest with you, but I am glad that there were some gaps in time, or there was a gap in time
Yes.
where I was able to go out into the workforce. And so actually as a part-time student, I'm pretty sure almost all of the students in my cohort, section of 20, 25 people
Yeah.
had been out for at least like a year or something like that.
Oh, that's cool. So it makes sense that you got along with them when you were able to get in person and really enjoy their kinship.
Yeah, definitely. And the other cool thing about Mitchell was that like a lot of people were non-traditional students. There were folks that had been on their second or third career who might have been like 50, 60, 70 years old and going to law school. And that was really inspiring. Because I think everybody has this idea of there's like the movie The Paper Chase or other legal shows on TV. I think I can't remember the name of it, but there's one about like students in law school.
Sure.
They think about like the traditional, like, okay, I just graduated from college, right? Now I'm going to law school. And they think of like Ivy League institutions or things like that.
Right.
Mitchell has been so good since the time of like when Warren Berger went there. I think it was called St. Paul St. Paul Law School or St. Paul College back then. It has always been a working person's law school. And they have always made it accessible to people who like need to work a job or who are taking care of kids.
Yeah.
And I think that, students like that give a valuable perspective to the law too.
Real life.
Of course. They have learned how to deal with managers above them or work with others in a collaborative sense.
Mm-hmm.
If they have kids, and maybe they're a prosecutor, they understand, like the defendants also have kids, right? Like,
Sure.
they can see people as individuals. And that's not to say that, like folks coming directly out of college aren't fantastic. I've seen a lot of people that are really smart coming directly out of college.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that was a great experience. And it was nice to be able to like pursue my passion in politics and now pursue what I really, really, really wanted to do, which is help folks. Whether that be, prevented from going to jail or prison, or maybe helping them with their business if they're a subcontractor or general contractor that has a civil dispute, and now hopefully moving forward, with like cannabis businesses,
Right.
Working with cannabis businesses, whether that's dealing with cities and zoning or civil disputes between different parties. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot to unpack in that space as we move forward with a recreational industry.
100%.
We saw it with the ice cream case on Judge Judy this year, but there's going to be a lot more, unfortunately, civil disputes between business owners, and that's why it's really important to get things written down and have things on paper. I know Jen preaches that often. Hey, even if it's just on the back of a napkin, that's a starting point. That's a reference that we can go back to. And yeah, so much I have seen where we have passion and we don't have paperwork, and guilty, as charged. But, we have to continue to preach paperwork before partnership as a way to safeguard ourselves against the unfortunate reality that not all business works out.
100%. It has been really cool to see what Jen and the rest of the team at North Star with the cannabis department specifically, working in a space where like everything is like in flux constantly, right?
Yeah.
We just had the legislation. We're now, seeing a lot of different moving parts move all at once, and seeing Jen and the team try to move things forward.
Yeah.
Maybe when you do hit those roadblocks has been really cool, because I've traditionally with like the legal realm, I've always been in the criminal defense realm. I worked in family law for a little bit.
Okay.
And so it's a new taste of a new type of law that I'm pretty excited to be starting with here now.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of terpenes would you associate with it?
Is limonene a terpene?
Yeah, limonene is a terpene. That works.
That was the first one that came to head there.
So, I love everything you've shared so far, but wrapping up, what is a day in the life now like for Sean Paul Kehren?
Yeah. So, I'm constantly trying to think about my clients. I think that one thing that, folks are thinking about now in the legal community is how do you keep a work-life balance, or how do you take care of yourself and your own well-being while also focusing on your clients? And I think that this is especially true when you're talking about criminal lawyers, right? Because whether it's a traffic ticket or whether it's a homicide, you've got someone's life in your hands when it comes to criminal law, right?
Right.
And so I've been trying to I just got sworn in May.
Yes.
So I've been kind of trying to figure out like, how can I find that separation between the office itself and the time outside of the office. Still working on that.
Yeah.
But
that's okay, right? If you're your first year of being an investment banker, you're struggling to understand the work-life balance, right? I think it's in a high-pressure career like a criminal defense attorney, that is completely normal, and you've just got to work to develop healthy habits, healthy stress relievers, not prescribing, but you need to spend time thinking about what works for you, and understand in Minnesota that there's seasons, and in the summertime you might be able to use this as a stress reliever. In the wintertime you may have to go indoors or whatever it might be. But I just want to support you in that, because it is natural to be feeling that.
I appreciate it. I started exercising pretty regularly since last year. One of the things I really, really appreciate at North Star, with our president, Courtney, with the other partners, Jen Randolph-Riza, James Gempler, and Dan Adkins, who are on the criminal defense team, is that they really focus on creating that work-life balance. They really focus on their employees specifically, and trying to create an environment that isn't like a stuffy law firm that you would think about on Suits, right?
Right.
I truly do feel like the folks at North Star are like family members, good friends, and I could go to my boss and talk about things that I'm thinking about outside of work and finding support there.
They hold space for you to be a real person.
100%. That is a great way of putting it.
Makes sense. I noticed that with just my interactions with Jen, right?
Yeah.
We can have our legal conversations, and then we can have our friend and just understanding how your life is going kind of a conversation.
Yeah. You had asked about a typical day in the life. Sometimes I might have a hearing right away in the morning.
Okay.
Where I'm not even going to the office. I'm going directly to the courthouse. I'm meeting with the client there, and we're going to do a hearing, whether that be an HRO or a motion to dismiss a criminal case, or a lot of motion hearings in the civil context are via Zoom. Which is something, it's a remnant of COVID, like a vestigial trait of COVID that actually was helpful for the court system.
Yes.
Other times I am writing some type of legal brief that we're going to be submitting in court. Sometimes I'm making calls to clients that are calling in about, whether that be an expungement or trying to get their gun rights back through a gun rights restoration petition.
Interesting.
I was fortunate enough to help successfully get a pardon for someone earlier this year.
Oh, wow.
And that was like 2 weeks after I had become like an attorney. So like that was so cool and such a cool experience.
No kidding.
And what I'm finding at North Star is that there's always encouragement to pursue your passion and to push yourself moving forward as an attorney. I think that it's important to push yourself outside of your comfort spaces because that's the only way that we can grow.
Yeah.
And so I found North Star to be a really comfortable environment to push myself into uncomfortable spaces, right? Because you have to be safe while you're also doing that pushing.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean it has been a blast. I'm sure that my days will change as I end up getting different types of cases moving forward, but.
Right.
The experience has been kick-ass. I will say that.
I'm glad you're there.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And if folks want to get in a hold of you or in touch with you, either through North Star or personally, what's the best way for people to contact you?
Honestly, my email is available on the North Star website. So it's just Sean@northstarlaw.com. You can give me a call. I think my number is also on that website. I'm available on LinkedIn. Kind of keep my social media outside of that, to myself.
Yeah.
I don't have like a Sean Kehren lawyer page or anything like that.
Right.
But
reach out on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch with Sean. Sean, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your story.
100%. Thanks, Steven, man. This is awesome.
We'll be right back.